GM, and welcome to From A to Z. I'm Zombie Shepherd, and today's going to be kind of loose. I don't know what I'm going to talk about exactly. The first thing I do want to start with is, I guess before I start, the first thing I'm going to start with before I start with any of things is, the only reason I decided to do this today is because my cousin actually said that he tunes into the stuff, and I hadn't done it in a while, and I've been wanting to, so I was like, well, you know what? Let me do one. Whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. And instead of like choosing a topic, I've decided that I'm just going to throw out a bunch of things that I've been thinking about, and then, hopefully either, on YouTube or TikTok or wherever you're watching this, you will decide to let me know which ones you prefer. I got a new camera, and apparently the hand motion I just did turned on the motion tracking. So that's interesting. It's fun. That's cool. All right, but I didn't exactly need you to be motion tracking for this point. But you know what? While we got the motion tracking, we might as well use it, right? Let me show you my new t-shirt designs that you can get on the Zombie Shepherd shop. Release the list. Boom. So yeah, you see the full range of the motion tracking too. Pretty cool. New camera. Got a new camera. So that's another thing, is I haven't done any episodes on the new camera. So let's go back to, there's a locked position I had already saved. Boom. We're right back to the starting frame. Apparently whatever hand motion I did, it does have like hand motions to turn on the motion tracking, so I did something. Anyway, so ideas for episodes that I wanted to do. The Crusades. I recently read a lot about the Crusades. I don't have the book on me. I left it at work, but it's the book I've been reading at work. And I've read parts of it before, but I haven't gotten through the whole thing, and I just keep reading different parts of it and rereading some sections. It is Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. And what was really cool about this book is that it is really super relevant into human psychology and why people jump into these bandwagony things like, all right, hold up. All right, we're back. So, yeah, one of my neighbors needed a jump. And we help our neighbors out, right? So there you go. All right, so I was talking about Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. It doesn't really offer a lot of why, but it just offers a lot of historical context for things that seem to be repetitive popular delusions. Things like astrology and oracles, beards, and how beards have been treated throughout history. And what else? The South Sea bubble and a few other bubbles like Tulip Mania and the Mississippi scheme. There's a lot of these different, things throughout history. What's really interesting, though, is this book was written in 1840s. So the wording is so modern, and the way it speaks is so understandable. It doesn't feel like it was written in the 1840s. And maybe it's been rewritten to be more legible. I don't think so, though. I think this is the wording, but I could be wrong about that. It just feels so modern in the way it reads. Some very interesting things, though, is I did read the section about the Crusades, which was extremely long. Like, I think I want to say 100 pages of the book is just about the Crusades. And like I said, this book has a lot of different sections to it. And Rusty's joining us on the pod today. The Crusades is a big one that I think was very interesting. The South Sea bubble was very interesting. I think a lot of people want to talk about the AI bubble and the crypto bubble in terms of the popular delusion, that kind of idea. Like, it would fit into that. Another one in the popular delusions is like thieves. and the idea of the noble thief, Robin Hood and things like that. And we even look at that like today, where we think of like revolutionary action, like we think of you know any kind of you practice anarchist calisthenics by stealing from corporations, in any small way. So that's something I was thinking, like, so that I'm telling you about the book in which I read about the Crusades, and it was very interesting because he talked about all nine of the Crusades and kind of like what was thematically the same, what was thematically different, this, that, and the other. And I personally like had my own views on Crusades and like what is going on currently in that region right now. And I think that, that would be an interesting thing to dive into, is just like how the Crusades have evolved and the context of the modern conflicts that are happening there and how much it does or doesn't have to do. It's almost like if this book was written in the 1840s, there's so much more that can be said. Think about what happened in 1947 and think about then what happened, in 2023 and how everybody's finally waking up to a situation there. And I think it relates to the old guard. I think it relates to the old way that things were happening. So that was one thing. Another one was Anna Judge and George Washington. And if you don't know about that one, that is Anna Judge was an enslaved woman who escaped from George Washington. And George Washington spent the rest of his life hunting this girl down. And he broke many laws across multiple states to do it. And he had other powerful people caught up in his illegal actions to chase this girl down. So I think that's an interesting, I read a book about that, and I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about there. Obviously, I've got views on social media, art, and AI always, and I would like to say that my AI views have changed a lot. Like, especially, I always did have a place where I was like, of course, real art is always going to be better. But it's like AI had a place for commercial art, and if AI art is the fulcrum that breaks capitalism and commercialism around art and truly gets people to stop celebrity worshiping and stop, or at least stop like industry worshiping, like it's, you know what I mean? Like, the Disneyfication, the Marvelification, all of these like big franchise things, like the fact that nothing can be original, all of this, like, worship of IP, for lack of a better way to put it, I guess, it's just a worship of IP and ever expanding universes, Harry Potter, Star Wars, whatever. It's all, but like realizing that like all of these franchises will replace people in a heartbeat. All of these networks, Netflix and Amazon, they will turn to Amazon in a heartbeat. So it almost makes it to where, like, I understood people, like illustrators' anger towards AI, but their only anger was, oh, it's taking my job. It wasn't actually that there's like a qualitative like badness in the art other than it not being made by a human. And the thing is, like, that's the better it gets, actually the worse I like it, I think, because I think that as it improves, we have the Xerox effect, which was already taking place. The plastic, instant gratification of the world, even print on demand. Like, my shirts are print on demand. I can't afford to make a bunch of shirts and try to sell them out of my house because any printer that's going to do that is going to want me to have like 100 minimum, and then can I sell 100 shirts? Is this design worth it? It's like, it's easier for me to go through a print on demand service where, like, what I make maybe $4 on every shirt, maybe less after payment processing. So I'm not even really, this sucks. I gotta say, like, even the print on demand stuff, like, it's great because I can have the instant gratification of my shirt, instantly. Even if I'm the only one that ever buys one, I got it, and I couldn't have got it any other way. And that's a beautiful, awesome thing, except for the fact that, like, then when you turn to, like, well, what does it's a public domain image. So if I was to have created the image, though, if I drew it, if I did design it, but if I had drawn it and done the whole thing, then, like, what would I get out of that at the end of the day? And it's $4 per shirt at most. And I could jack the price up. Like, these shirts are kind of lower priced, hoping maybe a few people will grab one. But at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's just, all of these technologies and all the things we're doing, social media, streaming, the ability to just use SoundCloud and Spotify to drop your music instantly into the world just to get listeners. Like, capitalism and the system that exists has taken advantage of our wanting and needing to create. Like, even me doing this now, like, I'm not making any money on this. Like, I'm doing this because, like, there's a part of me that wants to talk to the couple of people that are paying attention. And it's because I feel like why am I creating this stuff? Because I don't hear my voice out there. I don't see anyone out there saying, the things I'm saying. It maybe some of the things I'm saying people are saying, and other people are saying this, but in the combination that I'm delivering it, I just don't see it. And so I'm offering myself, and YouTube's not paying me because I don't have a big enough audience. TikTok's not paying me because I don't have a big enough audience. I'm not socially acceptable enough. I'm not the right kind of material. It's the whole deal. And I'm not complaining, saying, like, I am volunteering to do this. I could just not do this. But also, like, it sucks that we live in a world where that's your options, is either don't do anything fun and creative because you're not good enough or popular enough to get paid, but, like, or just let us make all the money off of you. Like, and it sucks. That it sucks to be in that world. And it mostly sucks, it sucks for your industry. And that's where the AI thing, comes into it, because no one cared about streaming stealing all of the money from the music industry, because everybody looked at the popular musicians and said, you're making enough money, even though they didn't really understand their music their contracts and how they were actually getting screwed too. And, like, the whole industry has always been about screwing the artist, but essentially by creating streaming and by democratizing creativity, every layer of democratization has put the old guard out of work. So, like, the internet and uploading videos and damages the film industry. People would rather watch YouTube than watch TV. You know what I mean? People, because, and reality TV almost primed it for this. Like, people would rather authenticity. That's why, you watch TikTok or YouTube over, watching a streamed reality show, quote unquote, because the production that goes into that takes out all the reality. And the only thing you're really addicted to when you're addicted to those reality shows is kind of the, like, you're, like, addicted to that, like, feeling that, like, the cliffhangers. That's really it. And the music, like, maybe my show would be better if I had more dynamic music and I was really, like, putting it in your face, like, this is a dramatic statement. I don't know. And I would like to do more, like, fun cutting in clips and stuff like that. But there's so much copyright issue, and it's like whatever. Like, um, but so like I've talked about before with AI about how I'm not gonna get into a lot of fights and arguments over like environmental moralism because I think it's disingenuous. I think that if you take one flight a year, you don't have any room to tell anybody else what they do with their energy. So I'm just gonna like keep it short at that. Like I don't think it's proper for people to be attacking each other about individuals about how they use technologies and how they use energy. I think it's more important for us to attack the corporations and the energy companies and the people who are actually extracting from the environment than the other way around. Stop fighting each other. Like the more we spend fighting people of our own class, the less time we get to fighting the people and constructing a future where things actually matter. Because any type of moralism is getting you caught up in like policing the behaviors of others. And whenever you're policing the behaviors of others, you're actually fighting a sideways parallel battle rather than fighting a battle that's going to change our like overall situation. So I did write a big thing about social media too, and how I feel like social media in general, people thought and people do try to sell themselves as artists there. But social media is not conducive to art. Social media is not conducive at all to that. And I wrote a whole thing about it. So that's something I could do more talks about. I'm starting to blur the lines here. It's going to be hard for you to like say this. So maybe I'll do a recap at the end. But governance, power, and democracy at the workplace is a huge one that I thought we could talk a lot about. I think that democracy is amazing as a governmental structure. It could be a lot better, but we need like financial freedom, and I think cryptocurrency is part of that thing. And but I think honestly that democracy at the workplace is the number one most important thing, because feeling like you are in control at work and that you're in control of like how the money your company is spending and the decisions your company is making in the impact to your community and all of those types of things are very important. And I think that until we get democracy at the workplace, we don't actually have any type of real freedom at all. Like freedom begins with controlling the means of your own production. And so that's why, going back to the AI and internet thing, like the internet gave us all the ability as artists to, and even as marketing and all these other things, any type of business, you suddenly had the control of the means of your production at your hands with the internet. But now everything's gated behind like, subscription softwares, and everything is, even if you have your own website, good luck getting people to it without using social media. And social media is not really meant for business. It really should have never been ad space, but that's the only business model anything can do, is selling ad space, because businesses want your attention. So anywhere that you give your attention, businesses will pay to intrude themselves in there. So governance, power, democracy of the workplace is a big one. Revolutionary power and criminal force. That one kind of came to my mind because of a thing I was listening to about unions and about, why were unions so closely tied to the mafia. And that's another thing. Like if you think about the Robin Hood thing I was talking about earlier, like powerful thieves. So that's kind of where I came in here, is revolutionary power and criminal force. It's the idea that like, anyone who is a criminal underground organization is kind of revolutionary in the sense that, or at least potential for revolutionary, because you found ways to skirt the system and to skirt the laws. And so you become an idol. You become kind of like, we can look up to you because like, oh, like the thing that is, or like anyone who feels like they're abused by the system can look up to that, because it's like, I am being abused by the system and you have found a way to abuse the system. And so naturally I'm going to like feel like that, yeah, that you're kind of a hero for me. My enemy's enemy is my friend, kind of thing. And so in a way, I'm kind of doing all these episodes very loosely to see like, where would you want to dive in more? Oh, I should have connected this earlier, but like when I was talking about social media not being for art, AI trying to replace people and all that, there's also this literacy and attention span thing that ties into that. And that is, I think that it's very hard to read and it's very hard to watch movies. I don't think, it's like why people complain so much about people being on their phone at the theater, or Netflix is talking about, oh, like your show can't be too complicated because it needs to be second screen material, is what they're calling it, because they know people can't stay off their phones. And even I'm guilty of this, scrolling endlessly, or I've been trying to watch movies and not pick up my phone the entire time, like at home, not in the theater. If I'm at the theater, I'm not going to pick up my phone. Like, sorry, I'm not that starved for the phone. And most importantly, like, I'm either turning it off or at least putting it on silent. And so it would really take an emergency to get through to me. I'm not going to check my phone for any reason if I'm in a theater. Maybe that makes me a boomer or whatever, but if I like, that is one of the great things about the theater, is feeling like you're going and immersing yourself. And so I'm not going to ruin that for myself. But like, we're so addicted to the thing that most people can't even help themselves. So the literacy and attention span. And so what I've been doing to like get out of that, obviously I'm reading a lot. I've been, I told you I was reading Extraordinary Popular Delusions and The Madness of Crowds. I read Never Caught. I read some fiction too. I read a Star Wars fiction book, Death Troopers. And I've been reading 1001 Nights. I have 17 volumes of 1001 Nights, as you can see back over here too. Part of the reason I don't read that exclusively, trying to get through it all, is because obviously, like, you don't, it's not a marathon. It's not like, whatever. If I never finish it, I never finish it. It's just a really cool collection to have, really cool reference. But part of it is that it is extremely racist and misogynistic material. Like, the entire basis of the beginning of the stories is misogyny. And there's a lot of racism, a lot of misogyny. And it's interesting because, like, there's no white people yet. At least not really what we would think of as white people. So the entire book is racism and misogyny amongst Eastern, Middle Eastern, North African, and maybe like Eastern to Central Europeans, but no Western Europeans at all. And I'm sure like some Mediterranean and stuff has crept into this. But yeah, it's really like, if you look at it, it's kind of the beginning of literature in a sense, because a lot of the stories were like spoken word before they were written down 300 years later type thing. So they made their way across many countries. And so there's a lot of African countries and a lot of European and Asian and Middle Eastern countries, and it's really historical. Also, like, a lot of like empire talk, but a lot of like border moving and stuff. So it's really hard to always tell. But like, one of the interesting things is like Aladdin is Chinese in the stories. Now that could be something that was kind of changed later, because a lot of these stories evolved, and the particular version I have is considered pretty accurate, but it is rewritten in a form to be more prose like, but it's more accurate in the sense that it did not shy away from any of the sex or the vulgar language that other versions of Thousand and One Nights did. Anyway, point being, literacy. Um, like reading that book is very much reading an old. I turned on the motion tracking again. It's reading an old style language. It's reading um, and then the other book from the 1840s, like reading in that type of, also nonfiction, going from fiction to nonfiction. But I feel like it's easy. Fiction is easy because, like, if you're gonna read fiction you like, it's more escapist and it's more like, oh, this is me like tuning out. So it's very easy. That's kind of like I picked up the Star Wars book because I wanted to exercise that literacy muscle, exercise that attention and reading muscle with something easy. Like my partner goes through books. She is reading like awesome. Since especially since we had the baby. Like she reads a lot. I kind of fell off reading because I was doing a lot of like physical activity, and so therefore like I was spending a lot of time scrolling, and then also at work, spending a lot of time scrolling. Because my job would have some downtime where it's like if you don't have a book on you, which I don't always travel with a book because like if you're not gonna have time to read, you're not gonna want to carry around a book. I did like put some comics for a while. I put like the Spawn comics on my phone, and I was doing different things to be like, all right, let's not be on the phone as much, and like if I am gonna be on the phone, let's try reading on the phone. I hate it. I do like audiobooks when I'm working. It's great, but it's not the same thing as exercising that reading muscle because reading is so tactile. Like, and it's part of the reason I think the books are better because holding the book, reading with your eyes, thinking with your mind, absorbing, it's kind of like the same thing as writing. When you're writing, you're putting, and typing counts for this, you're putting words down, so you're thinking and you're doing at the same time. That thinking and doing is very powerful. So it's the same thing for reading. You're thinking and doing, you're absorbing consciously. So there's something very different about reading and writing than watching a video or listening to a podcast or listening to an audiobook. As much as I love audiobooks, which however is why like for audiobooks, like I feel like the way I get around this is like if I want to escape, then I can listen to a fiction audiobook. A fiction audiobook is great because I can do the escapist thing where I'm getting the book, I'm escaping into the fantasy, and then I'm still doing a little bit of thinking, which is kind of my problem with audiobooks too, is because I might spend too much in my head and then be like, oh, I got to rewind. It's fine. But great for activities. Put on fiction. You don't have to be, paying attention hardcore because you're not thinking a lot. I feel like with nonfiction, you want to have your critical thinking cap on. Maybe not with every form of nonfiction, but I feel like with nonfiction, you want to be able to absorb and apply the information in real time. And you also want to be able to critically think about whether or not the author's biases or just this the field's biases are creeping too much into this. And you want to be able to kind of identify that and think about it. And so I feel like nonfiction isn't as conducive to an audiobook. Maybe if you've already read it, maybe if you've already experienced it, or maybe even vice versa. You can listen to something first and be like, oh, I really enjoyed that. Maybe I'll try to read it and then maybe you get another understanding upon reading it. Because also an audiobook, you're getting someone else's interpretation. Another thing is I love especially older foreign films. Like I watch a lot of Fellini and Wong Kar-wai and Lucille Fulci, and that's camp, that's horror, but still, like, the great thing about, and like a lot of like Latin American films too, like, so what's really great about watching films with subtitles is now you're almost doing three things at the same time. You're reading, you're listening, you're watching, you're paying, you're so immersed in the thing. And some people don't like it because they feel like they're reading instead of watching the movie. And for me, it's really great because maybe that's true. Maybe I spend sometimes I'm reading more than I'm watching. If it's very dialogue heavy, you're not able to absorb the scene as much. But it makes the movie even better to watch over and over. Like, I can watch this film multiple times because one thing I love about rewatching a film is catching things differently, different times. And it is harder to always pick up on like different cultural emotions, but also just like things like sarcasm and like when something is said in jest or when, as opposed to it being like taken at face value. So I think, yeah, like these are ways in which I kind of keep the tools sharp, like, and also, entertain myself. Like, but the other big one obviously is writing. And I feel like writing, that's another thing that made me realize how much I really dislike AI because people are just going to cheat and let AI write everything. And I've never used it for that, except like, see, I do use it for that. I use it for that in the sense with the newsletter. Why? Because I created the AI agent Azimuth. And so I created the agent. I gave this AI a personality or a collection of personalities from people that I admire and with a goal in mind that I view as idealistic. So my thinking being that this AI agent is supposed to represent a view of my higher self. And so I'm doing this podcast with you off the top of my head most of the time, maybe a little bit of notes over there. And like, I try not to do the reading a script type of thing too often. And I do like to write, but my options there is I can write a newsletter and release it with no AI, and then I can like read that at the screen if I want to. But I like to do this stream of consciousness, talk to you, and then I feel like, well, I did this. This is human. This is human to human. This is authentic. I do, as few cuts as possible. I'm not trying to like hide anything from you. I leave a lot of space in it. This is authentic as I can be to some degree, like, I guess. I clean up my background. I make it not too crazy. Rusty's annoyed with me because, I won't let him spend the whole episode on my lap because for some reason, as soon as I start talking to a camera, he wants to get in my lap and just take all the attention. He's an attention hog. Look at him back there. I love you, Rusty. Oh, other shoulder. Camera confuses me. Screen confuses me. But anyway, so this is human. So then I think, well, why can't I just copy paste the transcript off of YouTube after I upload it into my AI agent Azimuth that I created and have Azimuth give you a newsletter version of my words. It's her AI version of my very human text. To me, I view this as a legitimate use of AI. I'm not using problematic AIs like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Copilot or Meta. I use Venice, which is a more independent and decentralized AI that it has used versions of Llama, it's used versions of DeepSeek. It seems to be like an ever-evolving type of thing where they use whatever open source models they can to constantly improve the in-house model. And the data centers are decentralized, which means that they're not necessarily producing the head-on impact of the Meta and the Google data centers that are just popping up and Now, that's where I get back into the climate moralism because um, we don't know the impact of the data centers of other things. And when you also talk, like, what I mean by other things is like Netflix data centers that are housing the movies and the streaming, because movies and streaming produces a lot more of a carbon footprint and data center footprint than AI does currently. So I think that that's what I mean about the moralism over energy usage, is because you want to hate people for the energy usage of AI, but you don't think about how much just like being on Netflix and streaming, and especially at the same time, if you're watching Netflix and scrolling on TikTok, your economic footprint and your data center footprint is greater than somebody who might be using AI to, do a few prompts here and there. And, and I'm not trying to measure one to one. And that's why I'm saying, like, that's why we have to stop with the energy consumption moralism of individuals. Let's do it to the companies, make them act right. I'm going to keep repeating that. Yeah, but I feel like people are just extremely lazy, and the AI writing is going to become too, it's already there with, and I'm not hating on kids and students and stuff, but it's already there in that sense that, like, people really can't write anymore. Literacy is a problem. And I understand that the tools like AI and calculators and all the drum machines, I get it. I'm not a Luddite. But I do think that a lot of people undervalue effort. Like, there is something personally fulfilling about doing hard things, and that is important to the human experience. And I understand using tools to help you get to the end product faster, because there are points that you as a creative entity have. You want my quality, like, you're worried about quality being focused on this, and you're not as worried about quality being focused on that. And you can still come to a great product at the end of the day, is kind of, I guess, the way you can look at it. And one way to think about this is how popular pop music is. Like, the effort of having a huge band like Earth, Wind, and Fire, or an orchestra, or anything in which, big band, all of these things where you can be like, man, people, like, a 5-6 piece band, or an 11-piece band, 20-piece band, a 50-piece orchestra. These are like phenomenal, amazing things that take a lot of effort from a lot of people, and you think we would value that. But at the end of the day, the most expensive tickets you're going to buy all season is, one singer who maybe doesn't even write their own songs, playing to backing tracks, that maybe has like a DJ, but maybe not. Maybe the whole set is just a playlist, and maybe some lights and some pyro. And that is, at the end of the day, like, the amount of, and I know already you can say, like, well, what about the lights and the pyro and all that? Well, you can do all that with the 20-piece band too. So, like, let's not forget that. So the lights and the pyro and all that human ingenuity still exists when you have a full band, but pop music has eliminated the entire necessity of a band. Pop music has basically said, yeah, we don't need it. We're going to play to an iPod, and that's good enough. And, even electronic music is like, I'm going to get up there with my laptop and maybe a few toys that I like to play with, and we're not going to have live musicians at all. I'm not judging it in the sense that, I love electronic music and I love a lot of pop music, so that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, like, effort put into a thing does not equal appreciation. And that's the same thing we're going to experience here with AI, is that and it's what I was saying about your own personal experience with creativity is, if you're a rapper or a singer or just a songwriter or someone who really focuses on you as an artist, like, or maybe you only play one instrument, you might play guitar, you might play flute, whatever it is you play, you're like, all right, well, I don't care if all I have is a drum machine. Like, I can't find a real drummer. I don't really need a real drummer, because then this is a big part of the modern problem too, is like, oh, I don't want a real drummer because then I'll have to pay them as an equal artist. The drummer now has to get paid as, as a writer. So that's another thing, is like, because of streaming and everything, the music industry has been reduced down to as few moving parts as possible, because, why wouldn't I do everything by myself and take home all the money by myself? Why would I hire, or if I am going to hire people, I'm going to hire them as session musicians. I'm not going to give them any writing credit. I'm not going to give them the chance to earn royalties on my music forever. And then also we've cut out the industry itself, because like, I'm not going to pay for a producer and an engineer anymore. I'm going to learn how to do those things, or I'm going to like hire someone I know to do those things, or I'm going to use, I'm going to do my own mixing and use AI mastering. I'm already doing that. Like, I do my own mixing. My mixing is as close as I need it to get, and all I'm trying to do is get my volumes to a certain area. I'm using AI mastering. Why? Because it's built into my distributor. Like, I can go from AI mastering to every streaming service instantly. Now, once again, this is the conundrum of the world we live in, is like, the democratization of this access is fucking awesome. What sucks is I'm not going to make anything of it on it, and I'm going to pay a subscription fee every year to have access to the tools. So at the end of the day, like, beyond democratization of work, I think the way to democratize the internet, obviously crypto is part of that whole process. But the other one is, I think rather than data being a thing that is used against us and being used to sell ad space, or even if it is still being used to sell ad space, I think at the end of the day that everyone who uploads anything to the internet, contributes to the internet in any way, should be making royalties on their data usage. Everyone should be getting paid for how much they use the internet, because your usage of the internet creates economy. So you should be getting paid. And that would create a circular economy on the internet where there is money going every direction, and the money you get from on the internet, you would be using back on the internet. So it would create this like flywheel of, just a really open, like, fair use of the internet. Like, it would make people feel really good about contributing their writing, their videos, the reading too. Like, all of your attention is making money for someone else, and it should be contributing back to our society. Like, digital rent extraction is ruining our economy when it could be making it better. And this is the problem, is we don't have a society that focuses on people at all. Our society is only focused on money and progress, and that progress has come at the expense of everything. Actually, progress has even now come at the expense of progress, because why make things better when we can make money off of inefficiency? That's the game now, is just the more inefficient a process is, the better it is. All right, so, and the other big one, and this would be a lot of episodes if I do this. Not even if. I think this needs to be my big thing, and maybe this would get me on a good, steady track. And maybe I would just end up sidetracking every episode anyway. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I don't know. But I've been thinking about doing the way of life. Tao Te Ching. So, this collection of poems is very spiritual but not religious. It would be considered like almost an answer or like an opposite answer, so to speak, of Confucianism. Like it's not in line with Confucianism, but it's more um, focused on like, I guess for one, it was written to be focused on governors in particular, or like the emperor himself. Like, but in a way, it, especially in this hyper individualistic society we live in, like in a way, we are all the emperor, the god of our own universe. So I feel like the way of life is this way of thinking about self management and thinking about your place in the world, and how that, like, how your action coincides with your person. And like, if you want to produce the greatest effect in the world, what that would kind of look like for you, I feel like it comes through applying the way of life in a sense. Like, comes through this to me, it's like it's a being able to reconcile your anger with the world with your need for peace in yourself. And that's not exactly what like, it's not talking about that at all. That's what I'm saying it would offer in a modern context, and maybe why I would want to do episodes on this where we would do maybe one poem per episode. Like, I would just read one of the poems and I would talk about it. And there's interpretations in this particular book. I also have a second book, so maybe I would read both versions of the poem and we would think about it in both contexts. I've always loved this book. It's always been very important to me. I've read it hundreds of times. Like, this is one of those books that, like, and when I say I've read it hundreds of times, like, yes, I've read it straight through a bunch of times, but it's one of these books that I basically am always reading. Like, I will always pick up this book and read a couple of poems and move the bookmark along, or I'll shuffle through almost like an oracle. That's kind of my fun, sidetrack. Like, my fun thing with oracles is, like, I'm not an astrology person, or, I'm not overly spiritual in the sense that, like, I don't prescribe to one way of achieving spirituality or achieving awakening. I think that there's many ways you can get there. I think there are, don't get me wrong, there are like prescriptions, there are real yogic and meditative practices that help to achieve things, and there is more or less scientific reasoning behind that. But when it comes to less scientific things, like astrology and like tarot cards or religion in and of itself, like, I view all of these like unprovable spiritual oracles as fun. And what I mean by fun is not in a disrespectful way, but I think that, look, if you can pull out a poem from the way of life and read it, and that helps you to have a better day and treat people around you in a better way, then, like, that's awesome. If you had a question about what to do and a poem helped you, or a prayer, or a little section of the Bible or the Quran, helped you to make a better decision, that didn't hurt other people, then, like, I think that's awesome. So I love oracles in that sense, to have, like, something to ask, but not to be beholden to. One of my favorite oracles is the Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt. But it's a series of what were supposed to be like creative cards. Basically, you pull a card, like, you're stuck musically, you don't know what to do, pull a creative card. And I will frequently use these almost as like writing prompts in a sense. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, I want to write about something, and I don't necessarily have a topic on hand yet, so I'll sometimes just like use an oracle like that. I will pull out one of the oblique strategy cards, or what I'll do is almost do it like tarot, where I'll do 3 cards, and I'll write those 3 quotes at the top of a page, and then those 3 quotes become a writing prompt. In doing that, things came to mind, things started wiggling around in my head, and now I can start writing. Um, yeah. So I think in a sense, the way of life, what I'm doing with this is it is a talking prompt, it's a writing prompt, but it's also a way of me giving this knowledge to you, which you could easily just go read the book yourself. But some people need to be introduced to things in a more fun way. And that, if you like listening to me and, then this is more fun than necessarily pulling it out and reading it for yourself. And also, there is fun in context from other people. And then the other thing I would be doing with this is, I think part of the problem with all my other topics, and part of the problem with social media and the political end of social media especially, is that we're very much focused on like critiquing everything, being critical of everything, not very good at offering solutions. Most of the solutions that we can come up with are currently like, and when I say we, I mean left people, like leftists especially, more than even liberals, but leftists especially, like we can't offer a lot of solutions because the things that we want aren't even in the Overton window of conversation. And that unfortunately leads to, I guess you would say, almost like a type of puritanicalism, where people who are really on the left really don't have like uh any allies, because like Democrats and liberals are like not really allies to a real progressive movement. And so it becomes tough to like balance out that, like, well, how do I exist in a world in which what I want is not on the ballot or even in the Overton window? And it can make you think about extreme answers. And that goes back to what I was saying about, Robin Hood and the mafia being related to unions, and all of these types of things, like anarchist calisthenics. And so, what was the point I was getting to? I lost it there for a second. The way of life. So, problem with all these things, it's critiques, it's not answers, it's not it's not solutions. And when you don't have solutions, you tend to get angry. So you tend to be like, you get sucked into loving videos of people resisting ICE and actually like wanting to do revolutionary things, like going out into the streets and do things. Problem being that like you don't want to get psyoped into doing violent activities and just taken out of the game. There's better ways to create a future. And the other big thing is that, like, while I understand there's going to be violence in a revolution, we also want to create a revolution that is protective of the weakest among us, and violence isn't going to do that. Like, it's hard to have a revolution that also is not ableist, or, willing to sacrifice the weakest amongst a movement to create wins. And so I think part of the reason I would like to touch on the way of life is because maybe it's a context in which I can talk about some of these things and be more solution oriented, but also be more conscious of not creating more anger and more hate. And part of that is also because maybe I'm not the person to be leading those types of things anyway. Like, if I was a random person on the internet, I would not listen to me if I was saying, oh, let's go, commit violent political revolutionary acts, because I would very much look at someone like me and be like, yeah, nice try, officer. But but not just that, because like I feel like, it's easy for me to be angry. It's easy for me to call for violence. It's a lot harder for me to advocate, not for peace, because I'm not going to advocate for peace on all terms, but to advocate for like the it's not just the way of life. So let me double down on this. Like, it's kind of hard for me to explain this without saying a second part of it. The other thing I love is not just the way of life, but I also love the art of war. Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And so what I learned from the art of war, so the way of life teaches you, you could look at it loosely translated as the way of being. That's kind of the way of life. Like Tao Te Ching is kind of like, and I'll get into this when we start reading it, but it's kind of like a way of being. It's saying like, this is the way you want to be. You want to be in a way that makes you malleable and open and undefinable, and therefore in control, because you're not trying to control everything. And it's very paradoxical. And then the art of war is very practical in the sense that it tells you, hey, look, don't attack when you're in the low ground. Don't follow your enemy into the marsh. Don't, don't push forward when your men are tired and their men are rested. These are almost practicalities, but you take these things, you take the way of life and your center of being, and then you take the art of war and how you must navigate as a person of spiritual high ground to win against an enemy who has no empathy for you. And you yet must retain an empathy for them, because the way of life will teach you that in losing your empathy for the other, you then lose empathy for the self. Because like, it's kind of a golden rule type of thing where like, you're not going to win against your enemy by hating them. You're going to win against your enemy by loving them better than they love themselves. You know what I mean? Like, if you love them more than they love themselves, they're going to come around in a sense. And it's a hard thing to think about. It's the way water carves paths. And so taking these two things, the way of life and the art of war, and putting them in a context of like how we navigate such a complicated socio-political life, and I don't just mean it in the political context. This is also like, for navigating friendships and relationships, and just thinking about, even like your own, like how you feel when people treat you a certain way, and how you don't notice the way you treat people or feel justified in how you treat people. And it's just so many different social contexts. And in general, like I think another one that is tough right now is that we're in a context of society where like everybody kind of has a way of being like, well, here is my this is my corner of the world and how we're mistreated. And I'm going to focus on me and how I'm mistreated. And I'm not going to focus on the whole world. And I'm especially not going to always focus on people that are worse off than me, because I have my own problems to worry about. So I'm not going to worry about yours. And I think it's in worrying about everybody that we'll find a holistic and world peace type solution. It's in creating a system that is not exclusive and trying to kill. And that reminds me that wait, I had that was part of one of the episodes that I thought I would start off with. Was there's a Frank Herbert quote that I really like. um I was going to start an episode with it. So yeah, oh yeah, so here we go. um The convoluted wording of legalisms grew up around the necessity to hide from ourselves the violence we intend towards each other. Between depriving a man of 1 hour from his life or depriving him of his life, there exists only a difference of degree. You have done violence to him, consumed his energy. Elaborate euphemisms may conceal your intent to kill, but behind any use of power over another, the ultimate assumption remains: I feed on your energy. And I think that part of the reason I bring up The Way of Life and the Art of War is because I think that we're all very, very, very ready to use the violence of the state in order to get what we want. And in order to get absolution and reparations and whatever it is that we think that we're due from other groups of people. And we look at it as other groups of people rather than the mechanism of the state, which this is not being anti-government, because I'm very much of the mind that governance will always exist because it needs to, and that we are the government. But our current iteration of government is corrupt, and every form of government is prone to corruption. And it's going to be a constant striving to get better and better and better. But in part of that, it's in fixing how we think. So our hierarchical thinking and our ideas that everything can be fixed with state violence, like people that we don't like the way they behave, we can get rid of them with state violence or financial violence or whatever aspects that we think can regulate them into proper behavior. And I'm not saying that, regulation is 1000% wrong. What I'm saying is that when you create a dam, you don't always know the downstream effects. And that is what society's always dealing with. So yeah, I think that we are learning as a species. I think that that's part of our growing pains. I think that we couldn't have, we couldn't have stumbled upon the right answer in the beginning, and that this is something we're learning as a species. It's not, I know we like to divide everything up by cultures, but all of our cultures exist on the same planet. And so, like, as much as I hate the violence of the colonial experience exists. And all of these things that have occurred are part of the human species. And if you want to argue that colonial cultures are not human, then you are arguing for the ending of another group of animal species. You know what I mean? So, like, it's not going to, as much as we do need to repair all of the damage of colonialism, we need to do it in a way that doesn't dehumanize the cultures responsible for colonialism. Because as a species, we are going to grow into our next selves. And the continued us versus them, like, we need to realize we're all one human species. And it's not even until we realize that, until we become one human species, then we won't even begin to think about the animals that we harm, the marine life that we're killing, the things that we've decided are food. We're not going to work for the Star Trek future, and we're not even going to be able to, interact with alien species until we can think about ourselves as one species, and then think about the things on our planet as things that we are the stewards of, not the lords over. And I think that the hardest part about everything I'm talking about is that we're in a hyper polarized world right now where the things I say outright and the implications of the things can be taken, as aggressive acts of violence towards people. And in some cases, maybe I need to rethink what I'm saying and what I'm thinking. And in other cases, maybe I need to learn more about a context. But in other cases, I feel like there needs to be self-reflection. And that's kind of what the way of life end of it is about, is the self-reflection to be like, how much of my own policing of other people's behavior is not conducive to the end goal. I think that's really what it comes down to. And this episode ended up being a lot longer than I expected. So really quick, I'm going to run the list by you again. Tell me what you want to talk more about. Crusades and the modern Middle Eastern problem. Ona Judge and George Washington. Social media, art, AI, literacy, and attention span. Governance, power, and democracy at the workplace. Revolutionary power, criminal force. And obviously the way of life episodes, which would be, let me see how many that would be. That would be, wow. I might even save that for the beginning of the new year as like my goal. Because that would be, or shit, this would be longer than a year. So if there's 78, 80, 81, there are 81 poems in the way of life. So if I gave every episode one poem and I did one a week, that would be a year and a half worth of content. Anyway, so yeah, out of that last list, tell me what y'all want to do. Tell me if you want to hear any of that. Or, not to be that guy, but there's a big part of me that almost wants to delete everything and just get out of here. Like, there's a part of me that's just like, do I erase Zombie Shepherd entirely? Do I just get out of here and not do this anymore? Is this even important to anybody? Is this worth it? Are there other creative endeavors I could be doing instead of this? Like making music. And speaking of which, like, I do have an album that I'm finishing up, and I do need to spend time finishing that album and being in the mindset of that album, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm ready to do it. And it's one of those things like, who's going to do the art for it? Am I going to do the art? Am I going to, am I going to do the social media thing? A meditation and the way of life is kind of like a way of navigating to those answers, maybe. But also, who knows? Yeah, I don't want to use AI for this album. I've worked on this album for so long, and I don't want to do an AI cover to it, even though I already got an AI cover to it. I already chose one. And I thought it would be it. And I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it, because there is an element of like, I played the guitar, I played the bass, I played the drums, I played the synthesizers, I edited and engineered and sang it, did everything all by myself. So why wouldn't I do that to the very end? Why do an AI cover? So, I don't know. Tell me what you want to do. Tell me if you want to hear some shit by me. Yeah. And also, go get the shirt, the Release the List. I got some Zombie Shepherd shirts. I think there's a From A to Z mug on there. Appreciate y'all. Peace.